With great power comes great responsibility. A phrase popularized by Marvel Comics' Uncle Ben with Peter Parker's Spider-Man. Power can come in many ways. For Peter Parker, it comes through a mental and physical toughness to fight evil and save the day. But for many, it's influence that gives them power. Influence is a powerful tool utilized by some of the greatest leaders throughout history. Many have risen to power just by having an influence over people and having those people act in their favor to get what they want. But one of the quickest and simplest ways to dethrone an influential leader is to simply not follow them anymore. And this is a common theme even today, as we have influencers with millions of followers. Because of their ability to convince people to act upon something, they are given a platform. Who here uses social media? Please raise your hands. For everybody with their hands down, are you guys like Patrick Star living under a rock? I'm just kidding. Social media has become a major part of our everyday lives. According to Forbes Advisor, in 2023, an estimated 4.9 billion people use social media worldwide. And that number is expected to grow to 5.8 billion by the year 2027. Facebook, the most used social media platform, averages 2.5 billion average monthly users. And the average usage of social media per day sits at around 2 hours and 27 minutes. But on top of all of that, Forbes Advisor also shows that half of millennials trust influencer recommendations. This means that influencers have a big responsibility with what they promote, say, and do. And their advice will be followed by millions. So as we delve into this world of motivators, you will soon see a sinister truth behind the majority of these modern-day influencers. But before we get into what they promote and say, it's important to understand, how did they even become relevant in the first place? Well, part of that has to do with a trend starting around the 80s with the Oprah Winfrey Show, where she would suggest a product and her call to action would bring forth tons of sales. And this phenomenon was only accelerated through social media. You see, before social media, the only time people could really feel close to famous people and celebrities was through live talk shows and interviews. But the game changed forever with social media, as now it's as simple as a simple direct message straight to the person with a chance at a response. But the game has changed for them as well, who no longer have to wait for their moment of fame, but instead can go on social media and become viral, or their millions of fans will already be awaiting them. The reality with social media is that our modern culture today is heavily dictated by what the biggest influencers are doing. And when a lot of these influencers are, quote unquote, selling their soul to the devil, selling out on their morals and their well-being, all for money and fame, and then that culture, that toxicness, all pushed onto their fans, that is where there's a real problem. According to Statista, 77% of Gen Z and 67% of millennials trust social media for their news. This means that it is imperative that we hold influencers accountable for the information they inculcate upon the masses. With that said, let's take a look at the most recent conflict between Israel and Palestine. There are people who have or are currently living through the situation, so they can provide inside knowledge. Then there are people who may not have lived the situation, but they've intently studied it as to be able to provide unbiased, accurate, and resourceful information. And then you have your typical influencer, given a platform to speak about their expertise, but instead choose to speak about a trending topic they know very little about, all for views. And their simplification of these complex issues creates confrontational arguments rather than the productive exchange of ideas. Their greediness and their hunger to go viral makes them realize that it is provocative and controversial topics and content that'll give them the most relevancy. And the same applies to the Russia-Ukraine war, to politics, to anything that is more complex than a yes or no answer. These issues are not a good guy and bad guy situation and should never be belittled to such, because it invalidates the opinions of well-informed people. Remember, these are the same influencers that could sell a failed product to millions. These are the same influencers that could say anything you can imagine, and some of their followers will follow it like it's law. These influencers have a big responsibility in our world. And their misleading opinions contribute to the excessive hate that we see in our society today. Amplification of biases, inflammatory rhetoric, lack of accountability, the normalization of hate, the destruction of critical thinking, and the creation of us versus them mentality are just some of the things they are responsible for. Don't get me wrong. Influencers can have an opinion, and they can also have a great impact on the world through their platforms. But it is vital that we understand the difference between an opinion and a statement. Oftentimes, influencers defend the uneducated things they say by citing the First Amendment. The First Amendment does allow you to speak your mind. However, not to do so if it can harm others. For example, right now you could say the word bomb, but saying that same word on a plane full of people mid-air could probably cause some hysteria, getting people hurt, and probably there'll be some consequences for you. Influencers have a lot of power that comes with their influence. And unfortunately, their bad decisions can hurt both their fans and others. Sadly, we can't tell these influencers what to do. I mean, and I'm sure they have their reasons to do the uneducated things they do and say and promote. And while I find it so unfortunate that they're able to make millions off of misinformation, I find our right to freedom of speech paramount. And by infringing on the rights of certain individuals, we could set a dangerous precedent. But what we can do, however, is control our own decisions, hold these influencers accountable, and most importantly, demand the truth. This problem is only accelerated because of our failure to hold these powerful people accountable for their deception of us, when the only standard they're held to is a very basic one of validity. What makes this country great is that it is always we, the people, who choose who we want to represent us, whether it's a media influencer, a politician, or anybody that has any kind of power. So let's start taking action. Unfollow individuals that are trying to divide us. Educate yourself from trusted sources. Form your own opinions. And most importantly, speak up, because your opinion matters. Don't just be a follower. Be a follower who engages with the world around you beyond the passive consumption of content. Be a follower who can lead. With great power comes great responsibility. So I ask you, all of you, what will you do with your power? Thank you.